right to the consent agenda. Tessa, do we have any public comment on the consent agenda?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. Do we have any board comment on the consent agenda? Hearing no one. I'll need a motion to move the consent agenda.
Bill Baber moves it.
Consent agenda, Minto.
Thank you. Sounds like Baber with the motion. I'll take Minto as the second. I'll call on Tessa for the roll call vote, please.
No, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't get my I had a question on item 11.
Okay, is it pretty quick?
Well, it depends on the answer. The question is,
Go.
okay, on item 11, this is the progress of major report on the major projects. Still on the road projects, the 78, the 67, the 52, and the 94. They all have don't have any estimated dates. They're all to be determined. And this came when we saw this last time. I asked for dates on this, and here it is again. No estimated dates.
Hang on one second, Jim. Jim, hang on one sec. Somebody doesn't have their microphone muted and they're some crosstalk. Please make sure you have your microphone muted unless you're the speaker. Go ahead, Jim. I'm sorry.
Okay. So I was concerned that there's no dates for these projects, and then also I noticed on the corridor plans. So some of these corridor plans that came out, this first time we see completion dates in the corridor plans. Some of them are done in 2022 to 2025, and I guess I had assumed that these corridor plans were going to be done, or at least have some sort of progress on them before the RTP. So how are we going to do an RTP in 2021 when these corridor plans may not be done until 2025? It's an estimated date. That'd be a question of staff.
Colleen, you want to do it?
Yes, I can answer that question, Supervisor. So the regional plan provides the framework for all of the CMCPs to be done. There's more detail in the corridor study. So as long as we have the general aspects of each of the corridors in the regional plan, that's how the timing works. We'll have more detail for you on that when we bring the CMCP item to the Board of Directors meeting on July 10th.
All right. Well, all right. I guess I assumed that these plans are done before the RTP, but so what about the dates then on these corridor projects?
So we have two sets of dates. There's the first set where we'll have the draft plans around the same time that the draft regional plan is released, and then about 18 months later, we'll have the next set of the CMCPs completed.
No, I'm sorry. I went to the first part of my question, and that's on the 78, the 67, the 52. When you've got the list of major projects, there's dates on those particular projects. There's dates on other projects, but not on these specific ones that the board prioritized.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. I don't have that information, the detail of that today. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion from Baber, a second from Minto. Tessa, the roll call vote, please.
Thank you. On the consent agenda, City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Corey Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Mary Salas.
Salas, aye.
City of Coronado, Mayor Richard Bailey.
Bailey, yes.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Jim Desmond.
Desmond, yes.
City of Del Mar, Mayor Ellie Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
City of El Cajon is absent. City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Catherine Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor Paul McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Serge Dedina.
Imperial Beach, aye.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Bill Baber.
Aye.
And I believe Mayor Raquel Vasquez with City of Lemon Grove is logging on. If we could keep an eye open for her, I'll come back to that jurisdiction. City of National City, Mayor Alejandra Sotelo.
Buenos días, Sotelo Solis, aye.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Jack Feller.
Feller, C.
City of Poway, Chair Steve Voss.
Aye.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Vivian Moreno.
Aye.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Rebecca Jones.
Jones, yes.
City of Santee, Mayor John Minto.
Minto, yes.
City of Solana Beach, Councilmember David Zito.
Zito, yes.
City of Vista, Mayor Judy Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
And going back to City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Raquel Vasquez. The City of Lemon Grove will be marked as absent. Consent agenda passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. Before we move on, I want to remind everyone, please mute your microphone unless you're called on to speak. Thank you. Item number 13 is the RENA appeals hearing. Before we open the hearing, I'd like to ask Colleen Clemenson to provide a very brief history of how we arrived here in the process, and I'd then like General Counsel John Kirk to describe the procedures we'll use for the appeals hearing. Colleen, take it away.
Will do. Thank you, Chair Voss, and good morning, Sandag board members. Just to set the stage for your discussion today, it's important to recognize that there are three aspects to the RENA process that Sandag is charged with. So the first part of the RENA process that Sandag is charged with is working with HCD on a RENA determination. The determination is the determined number of units that the region needs to plan for in the RENA cycle. The second part of the process that Sandag is charged with is coming up with a methodology that gets applied to the determination. And that methodology results in the third piece, which is the allocation. And that's an allocation of housing units that each jurisdiction must plan for in their housing element. Today's discussion is based on an appeals to the allocation. Just to give you a few highlights on dates of when things occurred, because this has happened over about a 24-month period. It was on March 7th in 2018 that HCD gave Sandag a draft determination. On June 8th of 2018, the Board of Directors took an action to send HCD a letter accepting that determination. On December 21st, 2018, the Board of Directors assembled a RENA subcommittee to develop a methodology that would be used to allocate that determination. The RENA subcommittee met several times, and on September 6, 2019, the Sandag Board of Directors approved the draft methodology and submitted it to HCD for approval. The methodology allocated the 171,000 units, 65% of that based on transit in a jurisdiction, and 35% of that determination based upon jobs in a jurisdiction. The methodology also included an equity adjustment that affected how units were allocated for different income types. On November 21st, 2019, HCD notified Sandag that the methodology had been accepted without any modifications. This led to the third step, and on November 22nd, 2019, Sandag released the draft allocation. So that takes the determination and the data along with the methodology, which results in an allocation of housing units that each jurisdiction needs to plan for in their housing element. All of these entities, all 19 jurisdictions and HCD are eligible to appeal that allocation, primarily based on was the methodology applied correctly to come up with that allocation. At the conclusion of the appeal period, appeals were received from 4 local jurisdictions, the cities of Coronado, Imperial Beach, Lemon Grove, and Solana Beach. There were also comment letters on the appeals. All of this has been included in your agenda packet. State law requires that Sandag hold a RENA appeals hearing to discuss the appeals and comments and to make a determination on each of the appeals. In general, the appeals hearing provides an opportunity to determine if Sandag adequately applied the RENA methodology and made the correct calculations in doing the RENA allocation. After postponing the appeals hearing, following a request from the 4 appealing jurisdictions in light of COVID-19, the board voted last month to put the hearing on today's agenda. To assist us in questions about the State Department of Housing and Community Development's role in this process, we do have Megan Kirkuby on call available to answer questions. She's the Director of Housing Policy. John Kirk now will describe the RENA appeals procedures that we will use for this hearing. John.
Thank you, Colleen. Good morning, board members. The procedures for today's RENA appeal hearing were adopted unanimously by you as the board on February 28th of this year, and they're summarized as attachment 1 to the staff report, and that begins on page 4. For each of the 4 appeals that are before you today, initially representatives of the appealing jurisdiction will make a presentation supporting its appeal. All of the appeals are linked in the staff report. Some supplementary information supporting the appeals has also recently been submitted, and that is included as attachments to the staff report today. After each of these appeal presentations, Sandag staff, Seth Lichny and Colleen Clemenson, will provide their assessment of the appeal, including a discussion of staff's proposed findings on the appeal. Board members will then be invited to ask questions of the appealing jurisdiction staff or Sandag staff regarding the appeal. These 3 steps will then be repeated for the other 3 appealing jurisdictions. The public will then be invited to offer public comment on any or all of the appeals. The amount of time for that will be determined by the chair depending on the number of speakers. And then each appealing jurisdiction will be invited to present a rebuttal or final statement regarding its appeal. After this has concluded, the chair will close the public hearing on the RENA appeals. The board will then be invited to discuss the issues that were raised in the appeals. Motions regarding disposition of the appeals will then be in order. And as described in the staff report, those motions could go in one of 3 primary directions. A motion could be to adopt either staff's or a jurisdiction's proposed findings on the appeal, and based upon that, grant in whole or in part or deny the appeal based upon those findings. The board may also choose to adopt staff's or a jurisdiction's proposed findings with specified modifications that you may dictate, and based upon that, grant in part or deny the appeal. Or if you'd like to pursue a result that does not align with either staff's or a jurisdiction's proposed findings, you may direct staff to collaborate with the chair and the vice chair to draft findings consistent with your discussions today for the board's consideration at a future meeting. And that would require a motion to continue this item on to that future meeting. As you consider each of the appeals, a few points to guide you in terms of how the statutes, the RENA statutes, look at the appeals process. In order for an appeal to be granted, the appeal shall be based upon comparable data that's available for all affected jurisdictions, and appeals must be supported by adequate documentation of this data that's available for all affected jurisdictions. In short, these two statutory mandates require that an appealing jurisdiction provide you with data that you would be able to apply to your adopted methodology to reach a revised allocation. Also, the appeals must explain why the revisions requested in the appeals further the intent of the state's RENA process objectives, including increasing housing supply in a mix of housing types, tenure, and affordability in all cities in an equitable manner, promoting infill development and socioeconomic equity, achievement of greenhouse gas reduction targets, promoting an improved intra-regional relationship between jobs and housing. And that includes an improved balance of low-wage jobs in a jurisdiction, with a number of affordable housing units in that jurisdiction, and affirmatively furthering fair housing. All of those must be present to properly grant an appeal. And so long as your decision is based upon the factors that are set forth in the statutes, then your discretion will be honored and your decision will be valid. That is the outline of our process today and the statutory framework for your consideration of those appeals. And with that, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, John and Colleen. This is now the time and the place set for a public hearing concerning RENA appeals. We will start with presentations from the appealing jurisdictions with Sandag staff following them. I'd like to remind the city representatives and Sandag staff that these presentations should last approximately 10 minutes so we can accommodate the public and board member comments. Pursuant to the RENA appeals hearing procedures, I will now call on the city of Coronado to make the first presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Sandag board members. My name is Blair King. I'm the city manager of Coronado. First, I want to thank the board members for giving up your Friday morning to consider our appeal. And I also want to thank you for your fair and open-minded consideration of our appeal. We will be presenting our appeal to you via about an 8-minute animated video. The video will speak for itself. The general issues that the video will cover will be the unique land use circumstances of Coronado. 2, the difficulty in applying only 2 criteria with exclusion of all others to the RENA allocation. And 3, the misappropriation of Navy billets associated as jobs to Naval Base Coronado, without accounting for the barracks or housing assigned to those billets as well. Finally, this video was prepared according to the schedule of the original Sandag appeal process, which was before the full impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic were realized and the 24.4% unemployment rate currently being experienced in Coronado. We'd like to probably bring that issue up after the video. And with that, if we could please start the video.
The city of Coronado is one of the region's most unique communities. The small beach town with an island feel is home to just over 24,000 residents and hosts more than 2 million visitors each year who enjoy the pristine beaches, bays, Silver Strand, and iconic landmarks like the Hotel del Coronado. But Coronado's distinctiveness goes beyond these well-known roles. Bound by the Pacific Ocean on the west and San Diego Bay on the east, the island of Coronado's relatively small footprint is shared by nearly a dozen different local, state, and federal jurisdictions, all with restricted land uses. All told, the availability of land under the city's control for new housing units is very small. Here's how that looks visually. This base map of the city of Coronado's city limits shows roughly 15 square miles. That usable size is reduced by about half when you remove the bay and ocean areas. The San Diego Regional Airport Authority restricts development on more than 274 acres of land for their airport safety zones. The Port of San Diego has jurisdiction over 193 acres of land in Coronado. The entire city is within the coastal zone. And of course, the United States of America and the U.S. Navy have control of 2,757 acres. Additionally, the state of California oversees 121 acres of coastline in Coronado, including a designated wildlife preserve zone, all of which is undevelopable land. When we zoom in closer to the densely populated residential core, the areas in bright blue represent city-owned property. The areas in dark blue represent school district property. The areas in yellow represent residential zones. Green represents port property, which cannot be developed with housing. and the red dots represent historic resources. To put it in simpler numerical terms, the city of Coronado's gross area is 15 square miles. This is what RHNA allocations are being based on. However, the city's usable size is reduced to about half of that amount when you consider the bay and ocean areas in that amount. Take into account the Naval Base, Port of San Diego property, and state parks land. And now, Coronado's total area under direct jurisdiction is roughly 2.2 square miles. But it doesn't end there. Half of that 2.2 square miles is restricted because of the airport's flight zones, plus civic uses, parks, and designated historic properties. That leaves just 1.2 square miles of non-contiguous land for new housing allocations. So in July 2019, when the city of Coronado was mandated to add 1,001 new housing units, the gravity of the RHNA issue came into sharp focus. 1,001 new housing units on just 1.2 square miles of land. It simply isn't feasible. Furthermore, Coronado's allocation is inconsistent when compared to other cities' increases in the region. The San Diego region received a 6% RHNA increase from the previous cycle. Within that amount, the city of Solana Beach was assigned a 258% increase. The city of Lemon Grove, a 440% increase. Imperial Beach received a 541% increase, and the city of Coronado was allocated an unprecedented 2,000% increase. This requirement is the result of Sandag's one-size-fits-all methodology for doling out the region's RHNA allocations without any consideration for cities' unique constraints. For starters, the allocation formula focuses 100% on a city's physical location of jobs and transit stops, but offers zero consideration for geographic conditions, regulatory constraints, economic and market factors, capacity for new housing, or other atypical circumstances. In Coronado, the physical location of jobs is also quite nuanced when you consider the role the military plays in spiking these numbers. 46% of Coronado's total jobs are active duty military, and these jobs and their physical locations are different than all other jobs. And that's likely why active duty military jobs have never been used to calculate RHNA allocations in past cycles. For instance, many of these jobs are held by military personnel who are deployed to sea with homes on their vessels. Not to mention, there are 6,231 beds provided by the Navy for active duty personnel, many of whom are required to live in on-base barracks for the first 2 years of their enlistment. Yet, the city of Coronado receives zero credit for any new housing developed by the Navy. To further define the issue, a portion of the naval base is actually located within San Diego's city limits. Yet all jobs are erroneously assigned to Coronado, therefore contributing to the bloated RHNA housing allocation. Lastly, Sandag is the only metropolitan planning organization assigning housing requirements for military jobs. The Southern California Association of Governments, the Association of Bay Area of Governments, and the Sacramento Council of Governments all omit this from their calculations. And those are just the complications with the military quotient. The formula also doesn't account for the other half-dozen land use restrictions, which as described earlier are complex and constraining for the city of Coronado. And when the 1.2 miles of so-called developable land is examined, you'll find it's already hyperdense, with existing residential lots very small, most ranging from 3,000 to 5,000 square feet, with very few vacant lots. Furthermore, small cities like Coronado, Imperial Beach, and Solana Beach do not have expansive inland areas outside the coastal zone to accommodate RHNA. To make building high-density housing feasible, assembling ownership of several contiguous properties would be required, and then the structures would need to be torn down to facilitate redevelopment. This is an unlikely scenario. Additionally, the economic reality of the allocation amount has not been accounted for. Consider the extremely high land costs in Coronado. If the city were to build any new multifamily housing, it would be high-end condos catering to out-of-towners seeking a second or third home in a desirable beach community, totally missing the point of the RHNA allocation altogether. It should also be noted that Coronado's RHNA numbers were based on an inflated growth projection number, which was recently reduced by 6% by the state's Department of Finance. Finally, the whole arrangement negates the will of voters, who twice weighed in at the ballot regarding housing in coastal zones like Coronado. In 1972, voters approved the California Coastal Act and determined that residential housing is not a coastal-dependent use. The vote also outlined parking, height, and view requirements that protected visitor-serving uses. Multifamily housing would conflict with this law. Additionally, Proposition D, a City of San Diego voter-approved initiative, prohibits any structure in the coastal zone from having a height in excess of 30 feet. In fact, the city reaffirmed its commitment to the coastal zone 30-foot height limit in 2016. Another reason why this allocation number is not workable. Coronado is not opposed to increased RHNA numbers. The city is ready and willing to do its part. But the allocation must be within reason and must take into account Coronado's unique characteristics. Furthermore, the city is committed to providing affordable housing despite high land costs. It currently offers 181 deed-restricted affordable units and a 35-unit affordable housing project on Orange Avenue, which was just rehabilitated last year. The city's plea is for common sense and equitable allocations, including the ability to work with other cities that have the capacity and desire to grow. Simply put, a one-size-fits-all approach is a housing element death sentence for the city of Coronado. Under this plan, several member agencies are unlikely to obtain certified housing elements, which would lead to loss of state funding and grant opportunities, along with potential fines and costly litigation. We respectfully ask you to reconsider the RHNA allocation numbers for the city of Coronado based on these unique variables within our community.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Directors, my name is Mr. Community Development Director for the city of Coronado. We would just like to conclude our presentation by going back to the city administrator's opening comments that we prepared this video in February prior to the COVID pandemic that has really changed everybody's world. At that time, the region was experiencing roughly a 3% unemployment rate. Those numbers have skyrocketed up to roughly 30% regionally and 24% here in Coronado. We believe this is a significant unforeseen change in circumstances, which would offer the board the opportunity to make a finding to change the RHNA allocation pursuant to Government Code Section 65-584.05B3. Thank you.
Thank you, Coronado. We'll now have Seth Richney and Colleen Clemenson provide Sandag's response.
Thank you, Chair. Is that coming from me?
We've got some bad feedback.
Everything's off. You're off. Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Okay. We'll get started with basically what I'll be providing is information that was included in Sandag's draft determinations and some findings that we propose related to each of the 4 appeals. So we'll get started with slide number 3. So in the city's appeal, it stated that Sandag did not adequately consider information on military jobs or housing. Sandag staff recommends rejecting this appeal. The Regional Planning Technical Working Group, the RHNA Subcommittee, and the board all discussed military jobs and military housing at length in multiple meetings. The board ultimately approved a methodology that does not include a housed military adjustment. Slide 4, please. On one of the issues raised by the city of Coronado, I will bring up an appeal from that we agree and that we accept from the city of Coronado. Should I wait? Okay, hopefully this works. Still feedback. Testing. Does this one work?
Is this better?
Okay. It looks like we've addressed it. In the city's appeal, it notes that jobs on the North Island Naval Station should be split between the city of San Diego and the city of Coronado. Sandag, in our draft determination, proposes to accept that change. The jobs count will be realigned using the defense, and another issue involves a few other naval installations in Coronado and in Imperial Beach. And I'll walk through what staff's recommendation was for all three of those installations. Slide number 4, please. Slide 5, excuse me. So what you can see on this slide is an outline of military bases in the region. What we found as we reviewed the data that was used to calculate jobs for these installations, the Silver Strand Station in Coronado, Silver Strand Training Complex in Coronado, and the Naval Outlying Landing Field in Imperial Beach were not specifically listed in the Defense Manpower Data Center publication that we use to determine active duty military jobs for other installations. To account for the jobs of the two installations in Coronado and in Imperial Beach, Sandag's jobs estimate transferred jobs from the nearest installation, which was the Naval Base San Diego 32nd Street, to those two installations. In order to use a consistent data source for active military duty jobs, Sandag proposes transferring the jobs total back from these two installations in Coronado and Imperial Beach back to the city of San Diego at the 32nd Street Station. The Defense Manpower Data Center publication includes a category of other installations with fewer than 100 jobs. So the installations in Coronado and Imperial Beach would be allocated 99 jobs each, as that is the maximum amount of jobs they could have according to the DMDC. Next slide, please. As noted in Coronado's appeal letter, Naval Station North Island is split between the cities of Coronado and San Diego. The draft RENA allocation assigned all of these jobs to the city of Coronado. The final RENA methodology, however, allocates housing units based on the total number of jobs in each jurisdiction. And since staff was not able to identify a data source of the split of these jobs on the base between the two cities, staff proposes to allocate the jobs based on the land mass of the base in each jurisdiction. 80.5% of the base is in Coronado and 19.5% of the base is in San Diego. Therefore, all active duty and military civilian jobs associated with NASNY are proposed to be split accordingly. The next slide. Changes to the jobs count would affect the housing unit allocation in these three cities. Based on staff's recommendation, next slide please. Based on staff's recommendation, the draft allocation as described above would result in a decrease of 89 housing units for the city of Coronado, and next slide. And it would result in an increase of 135 housing units for the city of San Diego. We'll go to slide 10 next. The City of Coronado's appeal states that that the allocation fails to consider unique constraints to development that would require the city to violate the Coastal Act. The government code, as cited in the draft findings, states that Sandag may not limit its consideration to suitable zones or housing sites or land use suitable for urban development to existing zoning ordinances and land use restrictions of a locality. Jurisdictions wholly or partly within the coastal zone must work with the Coastal Commission when updating the housing element and the coastal plan. We'll go to slide 15, please. The city's appeal states that the draft allocation does not assign housing units in an equitable manner, and the city has disproportionately increased the housing units in the 6th cycle as compared to the 5th cycle. Staff recommends rejecting this appeal. The increase in the city's housing allocation of housing units in the 6th cycle reflects the board's desire to take a different approach from the methodology used in the 5th cycle. The final methodology distributes housing units in all 4 income categories, furthering the statutory objectives as described in the draft's determination and the proposed final RHNA plan. Slide 16. In the city's appeal, it states most active duty military personnel already have government-funded housing. The city has not demonstrated how excluding active duty military jobs from the total job data is necessary to further state objectives like improving the jobs housing relationship and reducing greenhouse gases. Based on the data available to Sandag, if one active military job were attributed to on-base housing in the city, this still leaves more than half of the active military personnel without available housing on base. The city has also not provided alternative data to use. Slide 17, please. The city's appeal states that Sandag should consider the new Department of Finance population projection released in January. Staff recommends rejecting this portion of the appeal. The revision of a final RHNA determination is not provided in the statutory framework. The RHNA determination is based on available data during the consultation process with the Department of Housing and Community Development and is not revised for either increased or decreased population estimates that are subsequently released. And slide 18. So in conclusion, staff recommends amending the City of Coronado's draft allocation by 89 units. As you can see, the total allocation would go from 1,001 units to 912 units. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thank you, Seth. And nothing further from Colleen on that? Just clarifying?
Nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. If board members have any clarifying questions, and I want to emphasize that, clarifying questions now only for Coronado or Sandag staff, please turn on your camera and I will call on you, Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say, Seth, in your presentation, you mentioned that the military issue was discussed several times at the subcommittee, and it was brought up, and that the board did not approve the military adjustment. Why did you leave out the fact that the subcommittee actually did approve and recommend the military adjustment to the board?
We were focusing on the final RHNA methodology that was approved by the board, even though it differed from the recommendation from the subcommittee.
It was recommended as part of the RHNA subcommittee. We met several times, had several discussions, and voted actually to keep that military adjustment in. I just want to make sure that that's part of the record, that the subcommittee did recommend leaving the military adjustment in there like they had in the previous years. I want to make sure that's part of the record.
Thank you. Are there any other board members with clarifying questions? Mayor Sotelo-Solis.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, with the 89, the staff recommended 89 housing units to be removed, where do they go?
The 89 housing units from the City of Coronado are proposed to be transferred to the City of San Diego.
Thank you. I clarify maybe just a little bit further on that. So what happens is that once that data correction was made, then we run the methodology again, and that is the end result. But they didn't just get, so right. Just want to make sure everyone understands that once that data correction was made on the boundaries for each of the jurisdictions, we do the methodology again, and that's how the allocation worked out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Final call for clarifying questions for Coronado or Sandag's response to Coronado? Last call. Okay, seeing no further questions, I will now call on the City of Imperial Beach to make its presentation.
Thank you, Chair and members of the board. And just so everybody knows, I just wanted to let everybody know that City Manager Andy Hall would normally be on this video with you, but he's out of town at the moment with some spotty coverage. But he is on the phone and he may be able to answer questions. So what you're looking at here is the City of Imperial Beach. Fairly unique city. It's 4.5 square miles, but it's surrounded by water on 3 sides. We have the ocean to the west, the estuary to the south, and then the bay to the north. Not only that, but we have 2 military bases abutting us. One is in Coronado to the north, and then one is in Imperial Beach to the south. And then, of course, further to the south is the border. So you need, it's a unique city because we're a bit of a cul-de-sac. You need to purposely be heading to Imperial Beach, or you're passing through to either Coronado or the city of San Diego. Next slide, please.
We did. Yeah.
So because of those circumstances we talked about earlier, it provides some constraints as to where we could actually build. It limits our area to about 2.1 square miles of a developable area. And that's further reduced when you take into account public facilities, parks, and schools. And not only that, but 75% of our cities in the coastal zone. And that's the area with the pink hash marks just to the left of that blue line. And as noted earlier, housing is a low priority coastal use, and we have to take into account coastal views and access and work with the Coastal Commission when creating policies and directives. Next slide, please. This just gives you an idea of some of the vacant land within the Imperial Beach. We're fairly built out. We have a lot of vacant lots that are small in nature, not a lot of large ones. And we could show you that on the next slide, the typical lot that you'd see in Imperial Beach. They're usually about 6,000 square feet or less, and we do hope that we are able to build on them, but they will yield a fairly low housing yield. Next slide, please. And this map here shows you a sea level rise analysis that we prepared for the city of Imperial Beach. As you can see with this map, substantial portions of the city will be impacted by sea level rise. A lot of the areas that are highlighted in blue, those are parcels where there's units on them currently, and they are impacted by storm events currently. And of course, this may worsen as time goes on, and as sea level rises, up to 30% of our parcels and 40% of our roads will be impacted by coastal hazards. We try to plan for these inundation areas, but of course, there's challenges with collecting data, determining the correct adaptation strategies, and of course, the sea level rise projections continue to grow. Not shown on this map are ESHA buffers, environmentally sensitive habitat area buffers. That would impact about 8% of our parcels, where again, it constricts development. And also not shown are our FEMA flood zones, which also impacts about 8% of our parcels. Next slide. What we're looking at here are the economic constraints for the city of Imperial Beach. IB has the second lowest median income in the county. 20% of our citizens are in poverty, and only 30% of the homes are owner occupied. Next slide. Because of that, clearly, since we have one of the lowest median incomes, we do house low-income families, and we make a continued effort to do so, but there's challenges in doing that as well. We only were able to build 380 units in the last RHNA cycle, and that was during a time of unprecedented growth. And we also had one of the largest residential developments in city history with 187 units. So about half of our units were built via one project, and only 40 affordable housing units were constructed, and none have been built since the removal of redevelopment. In an effort to provide some affordable housing, the city's attempted to partner with developers. We purchased a lot where we're anticipating to construct affordable units on it, but we haven't been able to get these completed due to financial gaps. Next slide, please. Now we're looking at the current draft RHNA allocation. So the city of Imperial Beach was allotted 254 units on the previous cycle. And as you can see on this slide, now it's 1,375, which is a fairly daunting number for us. And we have concerns whether this amount is feasible, and if it is built out, could it change the character and lead towards potential displacement within our community? And one of the issues we have with the methodology is shown on the next slide. So we realized that rail and rapid bus stations were used on transit calculations, and those did not impact Imperial Beach. But our focus is on the change from high frequency transit stops to major transit stops. The high frequency transit stops, you can see here, are shared between 10 jurisdictions, but switching to major transit stops further reduced that to only 4 jurisdictions, all of which were south of State Route 52. Next slide, please. So this is where Imperial Beach took a significant issue with the RENA methodology. The numbers drastically increased for our city with this change. And as you can see on this slide, City of San Diego increased their numbers 0.7%. Chula Vista increased 4.7% with the change from high frequency to major transit stops. National City increased 25%. And then with that one change, the City of Imperial Beach's numbers increased 69% from 816 units to 1,375. Again, a drastic increase. And on the right, you can see one of the City of Imperial Beach's major transit stops. And as you note, it's just a pole in the ground. There's no other amenities that you'd think of when you're thinking of a major transit stop. It's not a high quality transit station. And this is a similar case for the other major transit stops in the City of Imperial Beach. Next slide, please. So these are some of the issues we have with the allocation, starting with traffic. Major transit stops, in our view, should not be viewed as a one-size-fits-all. Transit stops in Imperial Beach are based more on end-of-the-line factors than increased access to job centers. Not only that, but IB, as we noted earlier, is a little bit isolated from the rest of the county. So we think that over-concentrating housing will increase vehicle miles traveled and exacerbate regional traffic congestion and GHG emissions, because many of these new units are going to use the roads and their vehicles to drive up north to jobs. And then finally, switching to major transit stops substantially increased the RENA allocation in 2 of the cities with the lowest income levels, that being National City and Imperial Beach. Next slide. So the housing issues we have. Development potential is limited in Imperial Beach. We have the environmental constraints we showed earlier. We have limited land availability. And we also have outside influences that sometimes conflict in their ideals, whether it be the Department of Housing and Community Development or the California Coastal Commission. They often have different directives, different priorities, and even the Navy, which we have to take into consideration in our planning efforts as modifications are sometimes needed for their operations. We also have a concern that any formula that further concentrates more homes, especially above moderate homes, which is 60% of our total, in our jurisdiction with severely limited jobs, lower per capita incomes, low ownership rates, and no potential for high quality transit expansion is flawed and could result in gentrification and could change the community character. Now, again, Imperial Beach is eager to build affordable housing units. Over the past 6 years, we've just been able to do it, even though we have some projects that are ready to go. Next slide, please. So ultimately, our request is that given the decreased population projections from the Department of Finance and the unique characteristics of the city, that Imperial Beach should be recognized as being dissimilar from the other jurisdictions, and that major transit stops within the city should not be used in the RENA allocation. So we're requesting to revert back to 816 units using the high frequency transit stops data set. That concludes our report.
Tyler, thank you. I will now call on Seth and Colleen to provide Sandag's response.
Thank you, Chair Voss. We'll start with slide number 20. As the City of Imperial Beach noted in its appeal, 95% of housing units allocated are based on the jurisdiction share of major transit stops, which exacerbates the concentration of low-income housing in communities that already have more affordable housing than average. Staff recommends a rejection of that part of the appeal. Housing units allocation is based on the jurisdiction share of major transit stops, which only accounts for 16% of the entire regional housing need of the entire 171,000 units. Of housing units that are allocated on the entire transit component, about 57% are allocated to the cities of Chula Vista, Imperial Beach, National City, and portions of the city of San Diego, south of I-8. 26% of the city's total housing units are in the very low and low income range as compared to the regional proportion of about 40%. Slide 21, please. The Imperial Beach appeal noted that major job centers in the county are located north of Interstate 8, and vehicle miles traveled by residents south of 8 would be increased by the draft allocation. Staff recommends rejecting that portion of the appeal. The methodology allocates housing units based on the share of jobs in the region. The city receives housing units from the jobs component based on jobs within its jurisdiction. The methodology contemplates housing production near transit and jobs to encourage an efficient development pattern and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Slide 25, please. The use of major transit stops does not procure development opportunities because it is easily moved. We wanted to point out that the transit definitions were discussed at length during multiple meetings of the RENA subcommittee and were therefore adequately considered. And we wanted also to point out that state law incentivizes development near major transit stops. It provides a qualifying project that's located near a major transit stop with CEQA streamlining. And they're also encouraged by the state as infill opportunities. Slide 28, please. The city's appeal notes that the draft allocation fails to consider that the city is built out. Per state law, Sandag may not limit its consideration of suitable housing sites or suitable land for urban development to existing zoning ordinances or land use restrictions of a locality. Projects near major transit stops are encouraged as infill opportunities, and state law again incentivizes those projects to occur. Slide 29. Based on the development trends and economics, the ability to realize the allocation of units appears unrealistic, and that a funding mechanism to achieve the housing allocation is needed to incentivize housing development. Staff recommends rejecting this part of the appeal. Neither development trends or economics nor financial incentives are considerations in allocating the regional housing needs under state law. In fact, state legislation removed a phrase from consideration from state law that allowed for the consideration of the market demand for housing. And beginning in 2018, HCD introduced a number of state funding programs to assist local jurisdictions with housing productions, recognizing the challenges that are arising from the crisis. Slide 30, please. The city's appeal notes that the impact of transit is disproportional when compressed into 4 cities. Again, staff recommends rejecting this. The transit component allocated housing units to 16 of the 19 jurisdictions, and the board, during its approval of the RENA methodology, rejected a motion to replace major transit stops with the definition with the high-frequency transit definition. And the city has also not demonstrated that the requested revision to use another definition is necessary to further the intent of the statutory objectives. Slide number 36, please. As I mentioned in the previous presentation, staff is recommending an adjustment to the City of Imperial Beach's housing unit allocation. The Naval station in the City of Imperial Beach jobs calculation is recommended to be amended. That would change the calculation of the number of jobs that are located in the City of Imperial Beach. And on the next slide, we can show the proposed revision to the jobs count. And the next slide shows the revision to the City of Imperial Beach's draft allocation, a decrease of 46 units from the draft allocation itself. That concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Seth. Once again, it's time for clarifying questions from the board for the City of Imperial Beach or Sandag staff. Mr. Bailey.
Hi, Tyler, thank you for the presentation. My apologies, I was having a bit of some technical difficulties. Did you mention what Imperial Beach's preferred RENA allocation would be?
Well, we're requesting just to revert back to the high frequency transit stops, which is 816 units. We're not sure that that's the actual number that would be viable for construction, but that's the number that we're asking for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bailey. Any other clarifying questions for Imperial Beach or Sandag staff? Seeing none, we will move along. We will now have the City of Lemon Grove make its presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Honorable Chair and members of the board. My name is Kristen Steinke. I am the City Attorney for the City of Lemon Grove, and I am here today with Noah Alvey, Director of Community Development for the city. The city joins in the arguments of its fellow appellants and has two recommendations today. First, we urge the board to direct Sandag staff to analyze impacts to existing affordable housing as part of the equity adjustment that is part of the RHNA methodology. Second, Lemon Grove requests that the board direct Sandag staff to allocate housing units based on the area surrounding transit stations, not the address of the station. Ultimately, the city is seeking a 55% reduction in its allocation. Noah Alvey will be presenting the basis for the city's appeal today.
We believe you're muted, Noah.
Great, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. So we want to begin with equity. So here you can see Sandag estimates on race and ethnicity. Thirds of Lemon Grove's population, the Hispanic, and other non-white. Next, you can see that more than 2/3 of Lemon Grove's housing stock is single. The median listing price.
Noah, let me interrupt. You are breaking up and dropping out with frequency, and I want to make sure that your entire presentation gets heard.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay right now?
For now, yes.
Okay. So just to touch on ethnicity, and just that more than 2/3 of the city's population is comprised of non-white residents. And you can also see that more than 2/3 of the housing stock is family. Here in Lemon Grove today, the median price of these homes is less than $500,000. And we have a median income resident.
Noah, you're still breaking up. Noah, you're still breaking up quite a bit. Maybe we can get some tech help there.
Yeah, this is James from Sandag. No, if you could, it's inconvenient, but if you could dial in, it seems to be when your mic is not as good on your laptop or wherever you're using.
Okay, we're actually dialed in right now through a conference line.
Okay, yeah, just get closer then, because every time you move your head, that's when we get the sound drop.
Okay. Thank you. So a little bit closer, a little bit better?
Actually, no.
Noah, maybe you should try to dial in on your on your phone. Maybe that would help.
Okay. Yeah, we can try that. Apologies. Okay, I'll turn this off and we'll try the other phone line.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you. Very much better.
Okay, great. I'm glad this is working better. So thank you so much. What we wanted to do is begin with equity. And so what you can see here on this slide are Sandag estimates on race and ethnicity. And what you see is that more than 2/3 of Lemon Grove's population is comprised of Hispanic, Black, Asian, and other non-white populations. Next on the right, you can see that more than 2/3 of Lemon Grove's housing stock is actually comprised of single-family homes. So the median price of these homes in March of 2020 was under $500,000 at $489,000. And the median income for residents in Lemon Grove was near $60,000. So what we see is that the reality on the ground today is that Lemon Grove has entry-level single-family homes serving a majority non-white population. So Sandag has indicated that they're addressing equity by allocating more above moderate housing or high-income units to Lemon Grove. Lemon Grove does not have large vacant land tracts available to build estate homes. The proposed RHNA allocation will require Lemon Grove to demolish existing single-family homes to build higher density. This will displace low-income minority families and force them to move further away from transit and increase vehicle miles traveled. Lemon Grove believes that the RHNA methodology needs to go further to address equity by analyzing the age of housing stock and current affordability levels to avoid displacement of low-income households. The reality is that Sandag is requiring Lemon Grove to gentrify and eliminate existing affordable entry-level housing to make way for higher income households. This is just not good housing policy and is not what the equity adjustment should produce. Lemon Grove urges the board to direct Sandag staff to analyze impacts to existing affordable housing as part of the equity adjustment and reduce the RHNA allocation to small cities like Lemon Grove. Can I have the next slide, please? So for context, Lemon Grove is approximately 3.9 square miles. Within the context of South and East County, the size of Lemon Grove is more like that of a neighborhood. For reference, just to the south of Lemon Grove is the Skyline Paradise Hills planning area in the city of San Diego, and that's actually over 7 square miles. This just illustrates how geography of larger cities provides greater flexibility for siting housing that just isn't possible in a small city like Lemon Grove. So Sandag has advocated for a RHNA methodology that is easy to understand. So I want to pose a question to the board. Does it make sense to allocate housing units to jurisdictions based on the address of a transit station or based on the area that that transit station serves? I would assert that if we look at the area that the transit station serves, we can achieve a more equitable distribution of units. Can I have the next slide, please? So here you can see Lemon Grove with the blue half-mile radius circles over the 2 trolley stations within the city. The dark blue shading represents areas outside of Lemon Grove in the cities of La Mesa and San Diego. So close to 30% of the walkable area around the transit station is actually outside of the city of Lemon Grove. We argue that the methodology does not go far enough for small cities and ignores the unique city boundary issues by focusing on addresses of transit stations and not the areas that those transit stations serve. Next slide, please. We also wanted to note that this issue is present in other areas. So here you can see the Buena Vista Sprinter Station in the unincorporated area of the county near Vista. The blue circle here again illustrates a half-mile radius from the station, and the dark blue portion of the circle is within the city of Vista, which is close to 10% of the land area. Again, the methodology here does not account for this issue, and it allocates the housing related to the station to the unincorporated county. Additionally, the county is not required to plan for housing near the Sprinter Station, only to show capacity elsewhere in the county. So in reality, this is likely to result in more units further away from the Sprinter Station, increasing vehicle miles traveled and GHG emissions. A much better approach would be to allocate a portion of these units to the city of Vista. Lemon Grove supports the high-level methodology and does believe that it works well for the larger cities, but we argue that the methodology just doesn't go far enough for small cities and ignores unique city boundary issues by focusing on addresses of transit stations rather than the areas that those stations serve. Lemon Grove does recommend that the board direct Sandag staff allocate housing units based on those transit station areas that are served and not on the addresses, and to reduce the allocation for small cities like Lemon Grove.
In summary, the city does not request that the methodology be significantly altered. Rather, only that it be taken one step further to provide a truly equitable distribution of units to a small city like Lemon Grove. Ultimately, The result will probably shift a few hundred units around, which isn't consequential to some of our larger cities, but it will make a huge difference for Lemon Grove. The city joins in the arguments raised by its fellow appealing jurisdictions and requests that the board adopt the city's recommendations, direct Sandag staff to analyze impacts to existing affordable housing as part of the equity adjustment, direct Sandag staff to allocate housing units based on the area surrounding transit stations, not the address of the station, and reduce the allocation for Lemon Grove by at least 55%. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noah and Kristen. Seth and Colleen, please.
Thank you, Chair. We will start with slide number 40. Sure. In Lemon Grove's appeal, the city states that the draft allocation undermines the RENA objectives by disproportionately allocating housing units to the jurisdiction based on transit and its boundaries. And as stated in the presentation, the city requests that Sandag modify the allocation based on the land falling within a half mile of a rail station. Sandag recommends rejecting this request. The area surrounding transit and rail stations and the related conversation about land availability and capacity were discussed at several meetings of the Regional Planning Technical Working Group, the subcommittee, and the board, and therefore was adequately considered, but not adopted as part of the final RENA methodology. I'll also note that the emphasis on rail and rapid stations in the methodology is meant to encourage future growth near transit, which aligns with state climate goals. Slide 41. This is slide 41. Okay. The city's appeal states that the draft allocation will serve to displace lower income households that rely on transit and emphasizing transit compounds segregated living patterns by allocating low income housing in existing low income communities near transit. Again, the staff recommends rejecting this part of the letter. The city does not present data or other evidence to support these contentions, and the draft allocation, as required by state law, assists in overcoming patterns of discrimination and transforming racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity by allocating a higher proportion of the low-income units to jurisdictions with a lower share of low-income households, which tend to be jurisdictions with a high concentration of resource-rich areas. This was a major component of the equity adjustment that was applied in the methodology. Slide 42. The city's appeal states that the methodology the city lacks sufficient vacant land to accommodate the draft allocation, which will displace lower income households without generating replacement housing. Again, as pursuant to state law, Sandag may not limit its consideration of housing sites and land suitable for urban development to zoning ordinances and land use restrictions of a locality. Projects near major transit stops are encouraged as infill opportunities, and state law incentivizes development near areas with transit by providing a qualifying project with the option for secret streamlining. And that concludes our presentation. Again, Sandag staff recommends rejecting the appeal of the city of Lemon Grove.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Seth. Board members, clarifying questions for Lemon Grove or Sandag staff related to Lemon Grove. Turn your camera on if you have a clarifying question. Going once, going twice. All right, seeing no questions, I will now call on the city of Solana Beach to make the final presentation. I think you are muted, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Voss, members of the board. My name is Greg Wade. I'm the city manager for the city of Solana Beach and appreciate the opportunity to present this appeal today. Slide. Next slide. As you know, Solana Beach is the second smallest jurisdiction in the county of San Diego. We have very limited land availability in the city, only 14 non-contiguous vacant parcels, and they average less than half an acre in size. Largely a built-out community, similar to others that you've heard from today. Next slide. Our appeal is based on the firm belief that the draft RENA allocation fails to consider a number of things, that some of which are required statutorily. One of which is the service area of rapid rail, or the train station, in this case in Solana Beach. Geographic boundaries of jurisdictions, we're significantly limited in our boundaries, as well as the boundaries and the jurisdictions that are train station services. Jurisdictional size limitations, we are assigned 543 units by virtue of our train station. Whether or not we're a city like ours of 3.5 square miles, or a jurisdiction of 30 square miles with one train station, the jurisdictions allocated the same number of units, obviously placing a higher burden and challenge for the small jurisdictions to accommodate those units. We have very little land available for development, and that is statutorily in housing element law, that something that shall be considered. Availability and suitability for land. We feel that the allocation does not adequately do that. There's an inherent conflict with the Coastal Act. Our entire city is located within the coastal zone. As such,
Greg, maybe you could turn your speaker down. We're getting quite a bit of loop on your speaking. Turn your computer speaker down might solve that.
Let's see. I apologize. Can you hear me? Is that any better?
Seems to be a little better. Thanks.
Okay. I apologize for that. I was at the description of the Coastal Act, maybe a bit further away. Does that help? In any event, maybe there's another application open. The California Coastal Act is we believe, in direct conflict, in as much as the Coastal Act places the lowest priority on residential development, whereas RENA is solely targeted at housing in a jurisdiction. I'll speak a little bit about that later. Obviously, with a coastal city like ours, up against the coast, with environmentally sensitive habitat on all sides, we are also constrained in that regard. Next slide. In 2018, NCTD conducted a survey of coastal ridership, primarily interested at where the riders came from, how long it took for them to get to the coaster station in Solana Beach, and what mode of transportation they used. Next slide. Looking at that data, the Solana Beach train station clearly services a region well beyond the jurisdictional boundaries of Solana Beach. In this image, you can see the train station with an X. 60% of passengers under the survey travel greater than 10 minutes to get to the station. Upwards of 62% travel between 2 and 8 miles. And 60% of the passengers are coming from outside the Solana Beach city limits. So what we've shown here is a 2-mile radius and a 5-mile radius, which shows that 55% of the land area within a 2-mile radius is actually outside the city of Solana Beach, encompassing 3 other cities, the unincorporated area of San Diego County. Obviously, this is a regional asset. Now, we understand that the long-term goal will be to place housing closer to transit. However, it's inconceivable to think that even if we did accommodate the 875 units in Solana Beach, that those traveling to the train station would move to Solana Beach to take advantage of that ridership. They would still come from other jurisdictions, and we would submit that a better goal would be to provide transit opportunities to and from the transit station to those other jurisdictions. And as such, those jurisdictions should share in the allocation assigned to that train station. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, housing element law, the government code does require that the allocation should look at land availability of suitable sites. In Sandag's draft response, they seem to, we believe they conflate the idea of availability of suitable sites with jurisdictional capacity or zoning. We are not arguing that. What we're saying is we have very limited land, and it is inconceivable to think that zoning or arena allocation will allow for the assembly of parcels disconnected, discontiguous, to accommodate the kind of development that 875 units would require. And then in the draft determination, there's a quote from ATE that actually states that this methodology does not consider land availability and suitability for development. And yet that's a requirement of housing element law. So we believe this is a shortcoming of this allocation methodology. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there are Coastal Act constraints. And repeating again, the Coastal Act places the lowest priority in residential development, the highest priority being visitor-serving uses such as hotel use, retail use, coastal dependent uses, resources for coastal access, including public parking. Those requirements place an added burden on our small community, which is a regional coastal destination, to provide the kind of development that 875 units would require. Next slide, please. The other, so in accepting an allocation of 870, that will come at the expense of the protection of coastal resources mandated by the Coastal Act. We just firmly believe that the Coastal Act, having a higher lowest priority on residential use, is in direct conflict with RENA's methodology, which places an absolute requirement on residential development. This is going to come at the expense of coastal resources that we are mandated to protect by state law, including coastal access, scenic vistas, and the protection of environmentally sensitive habitat. So by not including this factor in the methodology, we believe that it is in conflict with state law. Next slide, please. We have struggled with the jobs data that were assigned through this methodology. 9,151 jobs have been assigned to the city of Solana Beach. However, right from the beginning when we got that number, we identified that the Sandag's 2050 regional growth forecast had the number at 7,823 jobs. Similarly, recent zip code data shows 7,102 jobs on the beach. That ranges from 17 to 28% lower than the application in this methodology. When we asked Sandag for clarification and data support, we were told that EDD had provided that information. However, it was confidential and could not be shared with the city. Obviously disconcerting to not be able to analyze the data that informed that 9,151 jobs, which is much higher than those. And then, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown that number right out the window with the current 28% unemployment rate in the city of Solana Beach. Next slide, please. The other new information that we presented in our appeal and has been mentioned before was a revised DOF population projection of 6.6% less than that included in this allocation methodology. Understanding that Sandag's regional number assigns 50% to population, that's a 3.3% decrease. The draft determination deems this insignificant. We firmly believe this is very significant, and therefore this updated number should be included in the allocation. If it were, the regional allocation would have only increased from the last cycle by 5,345 units, and you see the two different numbers there. Next slide, please. AB 1730, we believe, gives Sandag the discretion that it may follow the regular allocation process, and it may also choose to follow a different process. And we believe during this appeal, the board has the authority to accept on their face each of these appellants' requests, including the city of Solana Beach, recognizing that numbers from the Sustainable Community Strategy and Regional Transportation Plan will be changing. Next slide, please. I've already mentioned the significant and unforeseen changes of the DOF revised population decrease. Next slide, please. And of course, we all know that not only is there a significant and unforeseen, but an unprecedented change in circumstances brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Business closures, some permanent, uncertainty with whether they'll reopen, increased unemployment, economic uncertainty that we believe will carry on into 2021, if not well beyond, disruption and change in paradigm from how people work, how people telecommute. Those are things that we believe will persist for the foreseeable future and should and must be included in this assessment and hearing of the appeal. Next slide, please. Our request is that you have a letter, the board has a letter that was submitted on behalf of all the appellants that we believe the Sandag board has the authority to accept all of those appeals on their face. We request that you do so for our request as well as the others. We also request that in the interest of due process, given that this hearing, this appeals hearing is a quasi-judicial process, that a tally vote be utilized to hear these appeals and render the decisions to ensure equity and due process. Next slide, please. So Solana Beach's specific request based on jurisdiction, I'm wrapping it up, jurisdictional response or jurisdictional sharing of our train station asset, as well as our other constrictions, is to request a 55% reduction. That 398 unit allocation would still represent a 16% increase from our prior allocation. Next slide, please. This is the last slide, just to show that the allocation, if we applied that 55% across all appellants, the regional allocation would still be more than if we were to include the 3.3% population reduction pursuant to DOF's current population estimate. And thank you for your time. Sorry if I went a little bit over, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you. Before I call on Seth and Colleen to respond, I just want to have the public get ready. We're shortly going to be at the point where we take public comment. So if you're a member of the public tuned in, please raise your hand now so we can get a sense of how many folks would like to speak. With that, Seth, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. We will start with slide 45. In the city's appeal, it states that Sandag employment data is inconsistent with data available by and from other jurisdictions to verify its accuracy. This allowed each jurisdiction to understand. Sandag failed to allow each jurisdiction to understand how these numbers were generated and selected as arbitrary and without support in facts. Staff recommends rejecting this portion of the appeal. Staff performed extensive outreach, including presentations to city councils in defining the data sources available during the development of the methodology to ensure adequate opportunity for jurisdictions to comment. And the city has neither provided alternative data or proposed a specific revision to the draft allocation based on this factor. Slide 46, please. The draft allocation fails to adequately account for the amount of land available for development in a jurisdiction. As I've mentioned, state law has limits on what Sandag may consider and limits on suitable housing sites, and existing zoning ordinances may not be considered. HCD noted in its letter dated November 1st that particularly relevant to supporting infill development and climate change goals is the fact that this methodology does not consider land capacity or vacant land as a determinant of RHNA. Instead, focuses on where housing is needed to encourage transit ridership and reduce commutes. Slide 47. The appeal states that the draft allocation does not adequately consider the city's small jurisdictional size or restrictions imposed by the Coastal Act. We recommend rejecting this portion of the letter. As I've mentioned, there are limits to what Sandag is allowed to consider, and jurisdictions wholly or partly within the coastal zone must work with the coastal zone when updating the housing element in its general plan. And the city does not propose a specific revision to the draft allocation based on its local coastal program. Slide 48, please. The city's appeal states that Sandag did not adequately consider a broader population and geographic area served by rail stations, and this justifies a modification to the RHNA allocation for a small jurisdiction with a train station that serves a broader area. The land around train rail stations was discussed at multiple meetings of the RENA subcommittee, the Regional Planning Technical Working Group, and the board, and therefore was adequately considered. The board ultimately decided not to include it as a part of the final RENA methodology, and the city did not necessarily propose a specific revision to the draft allocation based on this factor. And slide 58 as well. The city's appeal states that Sandag should consider the new California Department of Finance population projection released in January 2020. As I mentioned earlier, a revision of the final RENA determination is not provided for in the statutory framework, and the determination is based on data available during the consultation process with HCD and is not revised for either increased or decreased population estimates that are subsequently released. And again, that concludes my part of the presentation. Staff recommends rejecting the City of Solana Beach's appeal, and I'll ask our General Counsel, John Kirk, to respond to some of the questions about AB 1730.
Thank you, Seth. Solana Beach raised an interesting argument about language that is in Government Code Section 65584.05, specifically at subsection J, that says that Sandag may follow the process in this section for the draft and final allocation plan for the 6th revision of the housing element, notwithstanding such actions being carried out before adoption of an undated regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy. If you remember back, AB 1730 was very important to Sandag, and that allowed Sandag an extension of time to complete updates to our regional plan and sustainable community strategy. And normally the RENA process would follow those, but as part of AB 1730, a modification was made, and this was added on to this Government Code section to allow Sandag to complete the RENA process in advance of our upcoming updates to the regional plan and SCS. And that's what that language that we may follow this process, notwithstanding that we haven't finalized our regional plan and sustainable community strategy. And I believe that the jurisdiction is pointing to that may as, or interpreting that to mean that this whole allocation process is not mandatory, it's discretionary, and Sandag can choose to follow the process that is dictated by the state, or we can follow a different process. As a matter of interpretation, I think that it's an interesting creative argument, but I would disagree with it. Looking at the whole, not only of that one section, but the entire statutory scheme of this Government Code, of the RENA statutes in the Government Code, as well as the overall intent of AB 1730. Sandag, it says that Sandag may follow the process in this section. It's important to reference in this section, because even if you said that may is discretionary, it's saying that only the process in this particular one section is discretionary, and it points to specifically the draft and final allocation plan. If you remember back to Colleen in her introduction, we talked about our different stages of this. There's the overall determination, there's a methodology, and then there's the allocation plan. The argument proposes to use this purported discretion, as it's stated in the written appeal, to reduce the total regional allocation. That is the 171,000 units that are allocated to the entire region. However, the statute doesn't refer to that as a allocation. It refers to it, and this is in Government Code 65584.01, that is referred to as a determination of the region's existing and projected housing need. That is not an allocation. It is discussed in that section distinctly. Secondly, it's important to note that in the statutory scheme, HCD retains authority to determine whether the allocation, after we're all done with our process, whether the allocation is consistent with the existing and projected housing need for the region as determined pursuant to section 65584.01. And if HCD finds that we have not allocated the entirety of the housing need determination for the region as it was determined pursuant to the process in that section, HCD may reallocate. They can push back on our process, and they can effectively impose their discretion in place of the board's discretion. And then overall, looking at the intent of AB 1730 on the Legislative Council digest of that describes the intent of the bill. And while it talks about allowing Sandag an extension of time in order to complete the regional plan and the FCS, there's no mention whatsoever of what would be a very significant change in the statutory scheme of allowing Sandag to complete its RENA process in any way that it would like, and not to have to follow the mandates of the statute. So for all of those reasons, I believe that Sandag does not have discretion to disregard the mandates of 65584.05 and 65584.04 in terms of its determination of the allocation, and I would disregard and reject that argument. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Colleen, did you have something brief you wanted to add?
Yes, and so just the last wrap up in 1 minute. Again, just to lay out the 3 steps in the RENA process. The determination is the number that the region needs to plan for. That's the 171,000 housing units that the board accepted from HCD in June of 2018. The next step in the process is the methodology. The board adopted the methodology in September of 2019, and then that was approved by HCD in November of 2019. A lot of what you've heard today in the appeals gets at the methodology. And while we did spend time in our presentation responding to questions on the methodology, the focus of the appeals is really on the allocation. Did Sandag correctly apply the methodology to that 171,000 housing units and the resulting allocation? So the appeal discussion is focused on the allocation. I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll turn it back to the chair to start the public comment.
We're not quite at public comment yet. We're going to have board member clarifying questions in a moment. However, Solana Beach's time was ever so slightly compromised because of audio problems, and to make sure there wasn't anything else that Solana Beach wanted to add as part of their presentation briefly. Is he good with, go ahead, Greg. You are muted.
I said I don't know that there's anything really to add. If you can hear me now, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Do appreciate the time available to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks. Now we will go to clarifying questions from the board, specifically for Solana Beach or Sandag. Board members with clarifying questions. Mr. Zito.
Yeah, I guess my first clarifying question would be on the process itself. So are we going to have a chance to ask more questions after the conclusion of the rebuttals and public testimony of staff? Because it's not outlined in the process that it is. The process says immediately after the public testimony and rebuttals, we close the public hearing. Just want to make sure we're going to have more time to actually ask questions at that point of staff.
Yes, there will be time for questions and comment coming up.
Okay, great. And then from a clarifying perspective on just some of the Sandag presentation, I guess one question I would ask the staff is that, since John was talking about what process we may have to follow, it might be a good question for him, is there discretion
of Sandag or HCD to optionally follow elements in 65584.04, or are we supposed to follow the items that are outlined in that section?
Staff, who would like to speak to that? Looks like Mr. Kirk.
I'll refer. Thank you. So, as I understand your question, wondering if you can follow 04 versus 05. 05
Oh, sorry,
really...
to clarify, does our process have to meet all the requirements in section 04?
Your process must follow and meet all of the requirements in 04, yes.
Okay. In section 04, item E.1, there is a word shall that says the process will follow and this requirement, and this shall include an estimate, and later on stating including projected job growth and projected household growth. So if the methodology is stipulated that it shall include projected job growth and projected household growth, is that a requirement of the methodology?
What is referred to is that all of these must be adequately considered. That is the language, that adequate consideration is something that does not equate to a mandate that if a particular methodology is proposed by an individual jurisdiction, that jurisdiction's proposed methodology must be adopted. Instead, those factors that are listed in A or in section E must be considered, and as you look at whether something was adequately considered, because that's been raised, the fact that that those points were debated by the board and there was conversation back and forth on them, regardless of which way you ultimately land in that debate, that the evidence of that debate to me would be evidence of adequate consideration.
Okay, and similar on item 2, it says the opportunities and constraints in each jurisdiction will include all of the following. Item B, the availability of land use suitable for urban development or conversion to residential use. Once again, staff is noting that the determination can't be constrained by the fact that some of existing zoning, but this language pretty clearly seems to indicate it has to be included in the methodology. But once again, you're referring to some other code section that I'm not seeing, that it just has to be considered versus included, because this language to me looks like it must be included in the methodology.
I believe that the determination of the methodology must address every one of these factors. And I can ask if there's a question about whether our methodology considers every one of these factors, I would ask Seth to go through, and he can go through every one of those factors and point the board to where he believes that those particular factors have been addressed. But that is a legitimate area of inquiry for you, is whether or not all the factors that were considered were properly considered. Again, I would caution that this goes back to the methodology. And the appeal statute specifically says that your consideration of the appeal must be based upon whether the allocation was proper based upon the adopted methodology. So I would caution against any result that ultimately looks to revise the adopted methodology, because that has been adopted, it's been sent to HCD, and that they have now approved that. But Seth?
Okay, it's one of the qualifications that is in 6584.05B3 that things can change based upon significant and unforeseen change in circumstances. And would it not be reasonable to suggest that COVID-19 and 30% unemployment rate might constitute a significant and unforeseen change in circumstances?
That's a great question.
John, let me interrupt here.
Okay.
I think we're getting away from a clarifying question.
Okay, I can hold these, and that's fine. I'm just not sure what your intent is on clarification. Okay, yeah. I'll come back to my questions.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it.
You're going to give Seth some time to prepare then.
No, I want to make sure we get the public in here. That's important too. Any other board members with clarifying questions before we move to public comment? Okay, looks like The board has had their opportunity. We will now take public comment on the appeals. Please, as I mentioned before, raise your hand so we know you'd like to make a public comment. Each speaker, assuming we have a relatively small number that I heard, each speaker will have 3 minutes. So Tessa, would you call out the first public speaker?
Thank you, Chair. Megan Kirkuby.
Megan, make sure you don't have yourself muted somehow.
Megan, this is James from Sandag. Your mic is open. We should move on.
Let's go to the next and we'll come back to Megan.
Thank you. Mary Sayokurka. Sorry.
Good morning, board members. My name is Mary Sakurka, and I'm a constituent who attended the RENA subcommittee meetings. The flawed methodology ignores lack of available land, current density, proximity of affordable groceries, environmental issues, and market forces. The subcommittee realized the contradiction that taxpayers shouldn't be forced to provide housing for military members who already have base housing. Sensibly, the subcommittee recommended military housing be considered. At the Board of Directors meeting, Joe Stuyvesant, Navy Region Southwest Executive Director, stated that the military numbers that staff member Seth Lichney was quoting were not in agreement with the Navy's actual figures. When did Sandag get in the business of making decisions which would be damaging to the environment? The California Coastal Act declared that the coastal zone is a delicately balanced ecosystem. Future developments have to be carefully planned and developed, consistent with the Coastal Act. If Sandag is forcing housing onto a jurisdiction, it should be Sandag's responsibility to work with the Coastal Commission. Once Sandag can obtain Coastal Commission approval for further development, then and only then should Sandag consider forcing housing into a coastal area. Why shouldn't Sandag member agencies be allowed to absorb additional units? If a city cannot physically build its allotment, the state objectives have failed, period. The state, the city, the taxpayers, and the homeless all lose. If, however, another member agency is willing to accept more housing units and builds them, then guess what? Everyone wins. Likewise, the staff couldn't find how the small cities adjustment would be necessary to further the state objectives. Again, is it not the state objective to actually build affordable housing units? If small cities cannot accommodate their allotted numbers, then the units will never be built. In regards to the population projection, staff states that RENA determination is based on data available during consultation and isn't revived. So it's not based on reality. Now, cities throughout San Diego County are facing financial crises. Not only are they faced with a huge loss in income because of the pandemic, now Sandag wants them to face lawsuits and withheld funds from Sacramento. The hardest hit areas by the pandemic in this country have been those with the highest density. Further increases to density is hazardous to the public's health. Thank you all for taking my remarks into consideration.
Who do we have next?
Megan Kirkuby has her hand raised again.
Okay, Megan.
Can you all hear me? Can
Yes,
you hear
ma'am.
me?
Yes, we
All
can.
right, great. I had to call back in on my phone. I really apologize, but wasn't working before. Anyway, my name is Megan Kirkuby. I'm from California Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm our acting deputy director for housing policy. So mostly I just wanted to offer some clarifications from HCD. So we did approve the allocation methodology that's being discussed today, that the appeals are based on. The staff proposal to correct some of the jobs data continues to be consistent with the methodology we approved. That's just more accurately capturing the assignment of jobs in the region and helping with the jobs housing fit statutory objective. There also were some questions about the RENA determination, which is the number that we provided to the region. That number must be given out 2 years prior to the housing element due date. And the latest Department of Finance projections available at the time are used. Department of Finance updates projections annually. They go up, they go down, but RENA is a 10-year horizon. So we don't revisit the RENA determination each year as the numbers go up or down, or that would mean changing the RENA every single year. But it's a 10-year horizon looking forward, and it doesn't adjust to those interim changes that you see come each year with projections. Just one more point on that is the Sandag RENA determination was provided before there was a new cost burden factor added to the determination. So that is also a piece of the Sandag RENA determination that wasn't included at that time, that will be in future determinations. And the third point is just a reminder that we know things are hard. And there is a lot to do this year, a lot of rezoning to be done, a lot of new laws to follow, and HCD is here to help. We're operating Sandag office hours already, helping jurisdictions get into compliance, as well as providing over $375 million in planning grants to regions and localities, which has never been done before in advance of a housing element cycle. So those significant resources are available to help you all meet this challenge and do the rezoning necessary to get to do this work. And I'll just say again that we're here to help.
Thank you, Megan. Tessa, do we have any other public comment?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, that concludes public comment on this item. I will now ask each appealing jurisdiction to make their closing statement. I want to remind city representatives that these closing statements should be 5 minutes or less. Thank you. We will start with the city of Coronado.
Good morning, members of the board. Johanna Canlas, City Attorney for the cities of Coronado and Solana Beach. In this particular case, I would like to address General Counsel John Kirk's statutory interpretation of 1730. While I like John, I beg to disagree with his interpretation. The plain language of the statute clearly indicated that under subsection J, Sandag Board has the discretion, and you can also look at subsection F of that same statute, that it says that Sandag has discretion to reduce the allocation. If it was not, the plain language of the statute does not say what General Counsel Kirk says, and it comes down to, if it's unclear, then you're gonna have to look at the entirety of that particular section. And it clearly states that Sandag Board has the discretion to follow that particular statutory scheme or to deviate from it. And HCD does not have a role in that deviation. Thank you very much, and I'm available for any questions.
This is Blair King again. I just want to address a couple of the items that we do think that there's a misapplication of even your own methodology with regard to Navy employment. We pointed out that the Navy requires that people in their first 2 years of enlistment live on the base. That should be deducted by the number of jobs. There are housing opportunities on the base that people are required to live in. No account is made for that at all. And again, Sandag is unprecedented in being the only metropolitan planning organization that is considering military installations. Also, the reference was made to planning to the Coastal Commission by 3 of the appellant cities. Dealing with the Coastal Commission, changing and amending local coastal plans is something real. It's not, can't be dismissed as the way that Sandag staff has dismissed it. That's something that's easy to do. Coronado has tried to have high density, high-rise housing in the coastal zone. Coronado has 10 15-story towers. Those 10 15-story towers led to Proposition 20 in 1972. We know the Coastal Commission doesn't want to go back to high-rise residential development in the coastal zone. To say that that we should consult with the Coastal Commission implies that the Coastal Commission will go along with Sandag's proposition of the number of housing units within the coastal zone, when we already know that housing is not a coastal dependent use. In respect for the time, we'll stop there, but thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now hear from the City of Imperial Beach.
Thanks. We'll keep this brief. We believe Sandag has a great board. They have a great staff. They had a great process. And we're not going to dispute the hard work that you put into it. Our primary concern is that the change in one definition on the formula from high frequency transit to major transit stops changed our entire allocation by nearly 70%. That's substantial for us. So we believe that we're dissimilar from the other cities due to our constraints that we noted earlier. And we fear that these numbers will be unattainable and they could impact the character of our community. So with that, we're requesting that Sandag use its discretion to reduce the allocation.
Thank you, sir. We will now hear from the City of Lemon Grove. I think you may be muted again.
Noah, are you muted? You're muted.
Noah, you're still muted.
We can't hear you. We still can't hear you, Noah.
Noah, this is James from Sandag. You have to hit the unmute on the control panel from GoToWebinar. It's the red microphone on the control panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a green symbol. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. And I apologize for those technical difficulties. I just wanted to touch on Sandag's appeal determination. I found it interesting that the appeal determination indicates that the boundary issues were discussed and then incorporated into the methodology. They were discussed at some of the twig meetings and other meetings, but those weren't unanimous recommendations that went to the Sandag board. They were brought up on multiple occasions, and they were really just dismissed as items were rushed to the board. I think when it comes to the jurisdictional boundary issues, what Lemon Grove is asking for is really just the same favor that Sandag staff has afforded to the city of Coronado. In Coronado's appeal, they're talking about the jurisdictional boundary issues, and they're recommending approval of modifications to the RENA allocation. We're bringing up a similar issue in that related to the transit stations and the areas that are served by those transit stations. So I think what we're asking for is just that same courtesy that's been afforded to the city of Coronado for the city of Lemon Grove. And then also that you go back and address those equity issues, because the equity issues are very important to Lemon Grove, and it's going to have a large impact to existing affordable housing here in the city of Lemon Grove. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just wanted to add on one thing as well. The city of Lemon Grove echoes the sentiments of Solana Beach and Coronado with regard to the interpretation of AB 1730, that Sandag does have the discretion to adjust the allocation at this time, and that it should for all of the reasons discussed today. So thank you so much.
Thank you both. And finally, we will hear from the city of Solana Beach, their close.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the time. I too want to stress that we appreciate the collegial relationship we have with Sandag staff. This is by no means an easy process. And that said, we appreciate the board's consideration of our appeal. But must disagree with the draft determinations finding that Solana Beach did not provide any empirical option to the jobs number. We specifically requested that Sandag use its 2050 growth forecast population forecast That is an empirically driven Sandag number, and we believe that was a very specific request that we provided. So to suggest that we did not provide an alternative, we do not agree with that assertion. To the allocation methodology and whether it adequately considered all the things that shall be considered with respect to housing element law. I just want to quote from the section of the housing element law that deals with this. And it says that the analysis shall include the following factors: the availability of land suitable for urban development or for conversion to residential use, the availability of underutilized land. Those two things in and of themselves, and in our past interactions with HCD, typically mean vacant land. And as I mentioned, we are very significantly challenged in that regard. The determination, page 18 of the determination by Sandag, quotes HCD as saying the following: particularly relevant to supporting infill development and climate change goals is the fact that this methodology does not consider land capacity or vacant land use as a determination of RHNA. So essentially what that quote says is the methodology doesn't comply with that statute of state law. So again, if the methodology is the only subject of this appeal, we would submit that just in that instance alone, the methodology does not measure or meet the housing element law statute. And again, we simply are requesting that it does. There are a variety of other things that we could go into, but I just wanted to point that out since it seems the limitation of the appeal as to whether or not the methodology was adequate. And in that instance, by the read of the determination letter, it just seems that that cannot be said. So that concludes my response. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate all of the cities keeping their closing arguments relatively brief. Unless someone objects, I will now close the public hearing and we'll open for board discussion. And right away, I see Mayor Bailey on my screen. So Richard, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I think we have to recognize that this is a first for Sandag. Never before during a RHNA cycle has there been a single appeal of the housing units allocated, let alone 4 appeals. And the reason, of course, there are 4 appeals is because the methodology used disregarded the local general plan of each city, including the 4 appellants. Now, we know that each of the appealing jurisdictions is committed to meeting the state's housing goals. And we know this because each jurisdiction in their presentation and prior correspondence has volunteered to accept and accommodate substantially higher numbers now than in the last RHNA cycle. So I do believe that each jurisdiction is acting in good faith, and I trust that you all as board members do too. So where do we go from here? We could either go completely back to the drawing board, or we could take use of this discretion we have. So unlike other regional bodies, the California State Legislature, through the plain language of Assembly Bill 1730, which was carried by Assembly Member Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, makes the distribution of regional housing a discretionary action of the Sandag Board. So if we trust our fellow colleagues and we are acting in good faith, and we have the discretion to make a more nuanced policy that reflects the unique characteristics of each city, then I believe we should make the right decision as a body and move forward together today. So given that many elements of the appeals are interrelated, I believe that the board should consider and decide the 4 appeals together. So given this fact and the findings made in each appeal from each of the cities, I would move to reduce the draft allocations of the 4 appealing cities by the amounts that each appellant has requested. And that's my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I think Mr. Zito is motioning that he would like to second that. Am I correct, Mr. Zito?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a
I've
second.
got on the board before me, so you can let him speak first and ask questions first if you want.
Thank you for that, David. Serge.
Yeah, I want to thank my colleagues in Solana Beach, Lemon Grove, and Coronado for making their presentations, as well as obviously the Sandag staff and Sandag board for all the thought that's gone into this. As someone who's like any small city mayor trying to make policy work on the ground, I think what I've seen are what would be the unintended consequences, and we'll frame it like this. If an equity adjustment in a small, diverse city like Lemon Grove, with 60% of our residents are African American, Latino, Native American, and Asian American, that majority of our residents are low income, and the areas specifically along our major transit stops are all high density areas where the majority of our residents are low income. If we're assigning the majority of our housing, 60% in that allocation, over 800 units, to actually be high income units, what the images would be the dislocation of the majority of our low income, high density housing along our major transit stops. So all we're asking is to recognize that this is for Imperial Beach specifically, this is an inequitable sort of process that would allow us to absolutely disrupt our community and completely transform the character of our community. Because if there's going to be 1,300 units built and 800 or more than 800 of those units are in the high income category, that would mean the absolute dislocation and disruption of the fabric of our blue collar working class majority minority community. So we are committed as a city to build affordable housing. But what we've seen with the paper policy process in Sacramento and lots of posturing is that actually there's been zero funding available for Imperial Beach. We've been begging and begging and begging for us to actually build affordable housing, even though we have 2 projects ready to go. And with the last of our redevelopment money, we actually bought out a slumlord, tore down her property, and now that property sits vacant. And we're working with Ginger Hinsky and others, as you know, amazing developers, begging investors to put money into affordable housing projects. So all we're saying is to balance the paper planning process with the reality on the ground, and to understand the constraints that all 4 cities face, whether it's the Coastal Commission, sea level rise, or issues related to making sure that, and I think in the case of Imperial Beach and Lemon Grove, that our proud working class majority minority communities have a decent place to live and a community they can call home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Dedina. Mr. Zito, did you have further comment?
Yeah, I wanted to make a few more comments. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Am I audible well enough? So
yes.
Yeah, so I was originally going to ask more questions of staff, but I think I got most of my prior points in, and would like to thank staff and the other board members for the engagement and the time in this particular process, even though I don't agree with where it has ended up so far to date. I think a little bit of retrospective on the process will be useful and afterwards when it all wraps up, and to figure out how we can do it better, because this doesn't bode well for the outcome of the regional transportation plan if we are so messed up in how we're doing the RENA allocation process. And to follow on to Mayor Bailey's point, not only is this the first time of any appeal from the perspective of the allocation process, but it's also the first time we're attempting to move forward with an allocation that doesn't even have support from the majority of the board. I mean, we've had to move, every time we've moved forward, it's moved forward with a weighted vote. And that does not bode well for building housing units. I just want to point that out. You know, every time I've brought this up, is I thought we're here to build housing units. I thought that's the intent. Solana Beach wants to do our part. We just want to have a shot at actually being able to do it. I think we've provided enough evidence in our testimony as to why we believe that the motion that Mayor Bailey made is acceptable and doable, particularly with the significant and unforeseen change circumstances that have occurred. So I do want to close with, an example. I find when you're looking at where you're at, sometimes it helps to take very crystal clear examples of what is generating the problem. And you'll notice we have 4 small cities that are built out that have filed appeals. So I'd like to do this thought process. So think of 2 cities. I'll call one city Z and the other one city 6. They are adjacent to each other. Both are in a suburban metropolitan area and are 2 miles by 2 miles, 4 square miles. City Z is fully built out to the highest and best use with 90% of its parcels at max density, has a transit station and robust commercial area generating jobs. City 6, right next door, About 25% of the land is vacant, undeveloped parcels zoned for high-density residential or mixed-use development. Many of these parcels within 1.5 miles of the transit station in City Z. Not much development commercial space, so relatively low job numbers. Using our current methodology without granting any of the appeals in the above scenario, we would allocate over 85% of the units to City Z and less than 15% of the units to City 6. That makes no sense, and it demonstrates why small cities that have certain transit oddities and are well built out are so heavily impacted and are appealing this particular methodology and the results without including some of the other factors that have been requested and considered. So with that, that is why I support the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Zito. Mayor Vasquez, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking during this difficult time of having this discussion about RHNA. One thing that I always like to note is that the city of Lemon Grove, for the 5th cycle, not only did we meet our requirements, but we exceeded our requirements as it relates to building affordable housing. And so that has always been our commitment, to build housing when and where we can. But in this moment, we know that the RHNA methodology, it works great for larger cities and jurisdictions throughout the county. And I know that what we've seen today is that the methodology needs to go further to address the unique and unusual characteristics in small cities. And what I'd like to say in this moment is that Lemon Grove, we want to do our part, but we need to see numbers, final numbers that are fair. We don't want to see gentrification of Lemon Grove and, excuse me, and the loss of a sense of community. You know, we are truly a working class community. And, you know, honestly, we don't want to see loss of our affordable housing stock. So in this moment, I am respectfully urging the board, you know, and Sandag staff to implement our recommendations and to reduce Lemon Grove's RHNA allocation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Vasquez. Mayor Minto.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. First of all, I'd like to say that I want to thank staff and the committee for all the hard work they did. I think they put in a lot of time. I want to make a couple points though, and they are that I think the overall allocation of 171,000 homes to me seems to be an arbitrary number. I say this based on the fact that we debated originally between 116,000, if I remember that number correctly, and the 171,000. Seems to me it'd be a more efficient method to determine what the actual number of homes are that can be built in each jurisdiction. And then you put together simple math, and that suggests what's the overall allocation for the county. So I think that that the committee and staff, they're under a lot of pressure to reach that unattainable number. That's why maybe we have a couple of problems with this. And then secondly, we've heard several times this morning that the numbers presented and then rejected are based on laws being applied to those numbers. And I think it may have been a good idea to see every one of those laws that pertain to this. I know we've talked about them, but it's a different situation when you're actually looking at them. And that, so we'd have a better understanding how they're used. And I would also suggest that AB 1730 doesn't go far enough in meeting the needs that we have here. And so if we understood all those laws and saw them in front of us and maybe had them maybe originally in hindsight explained to us, we'd have a better understanding how to do this. And then maybe it would give us a starting point to give direction to our staff on maybe some of these laws need to have some amendments, and we can go to our state legislators and get those amendments. And that way we wouldn't see that there may be an overreaching effect to these codes. And then, but I also like to note that currently under the state law, there is no penalty for not meeting all of the regional needs assessment numbers. So in my opinion, based on what I've heard this morning, I believe there is evidence to support the appeals. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mayor Minto. Mayor Salas. Seems like you may be muted.
Okay, is that better?
There you go.
Okay,
Good
thank
morning.
you. Well, good morning to all of you. And, you know, this has been a long process. It's not been an easy process. And, you know, in many respects, I really sympathize with the smaller cities that are going to find it really, really difficult to meet these goals, which, you know, in my estimation, it's going to be really difficult, perhaps, perhaps impossible to meet those goals. However, we've gone through this long process. You know, I was a member of the subcommittee, and I know how this evolved and how we came to a final vote last November, really in essence, to go with the staff's recommendation as it is today. And so I would like to make a motion that we do go with the staff's recommendation, and that is my motion, my substitute motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Salas. Mayor Sotelo Solis.
And I will second that motion, again, as stated by Mayor Salas and a number of other speakers. We have had, I think, a thorough conversation. I'm really glad that we are using the process to get those appeals in place. We need to move forward. And again, I will be seconding the motion to move forward with staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. Mayor Haviland.
Thank you. I understand the frustration over this process. Most jurisdictions, including Del Mar, simply don't have the tools today to meet the numbers given to us to meet our housing allocation. And this could result in disastrous results for our communities. And it will further our housing crisis if we don't meet our goals. And that concern has been heard loud and clear throughout this process. But the solution is not to reduce the production of desperately needed housing, but to fight for more tools. My experience with our state representatives is that they are eager to work with us to solve this problem. I think neighboring cities need to work together to find solutions. I don't think any one city is going to be able to solve this on their own, certainly not the small cities. For example, the state and federal property in our jurisdictions that provide a significant number of jobs aren't required to provide any housing to go with those jobs. We need tools to work with our adjoining cities and unlock those resources. We need localized solutions and tools to preserve our existing housing stock. Short-term rental units that can be an asset in some communities, in my community, are having a devastating impact on the amount of housing that is available for long-term residents. So I hope the Sandag board will shift its focus and its resources to working together to identify those solutions and to advocate at the state for the tools that we need to meet our regional housing goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Bailey.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Question for the maker of the substitute motion, Mayor Salas. I'm just curious to know which of the elements in whichever appeal did you find insufficient?
Well, I think that staff, when I read the staff responses, I thought that they were adequate. I thought that they were valid.
Could you specify any, just out of curiosity, specifically related to Coronado?
No.
Okay. So to be clear, you're making a motion that you're unable to specify what the shortcomings of each appellant's appeal are.
As I stated before, I thought that the staff recommendations were clearly stated and their reasons for rejecting the appeals were clearly stated in the report.
Right, and so my question to you is, which element of Coronado's appeal did you find insufficient?
Richard, why don't you finish up with what you'd like to say? I don't want to turn this into.
No, I don't either. I don't either, Chair. It's just obviously, you know, we're supposed to be acting as a board. We're supposed to be acting as a region. We have 4 jurisdictions that have submitted appeals. We have the discretion as a board to move forward together in a very collegial manner. So I'm just genuinely curious to know why we wouldn't take that course of action that's available to us. If all of the 4 appellants are committed to building more housing, we should give them that opportunity rather than put them in this position that they will be that this action of the substitute motion will put them into their detriment.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Sotelo-Solis.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to do point of order with regards to the motion. The motion is on the floor. I think there was plenty of time to get the discussion, and I know that we are here, but to question the maker of the motion, and you know, for me as a second, the motion is on the floor, and so you know, we need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feller.
I think the process is unfair. I think anytime you have the state mandating things is a total sham on what actually cities need. It's the cities that should be deciding things. But I think we also have to be ready and able and aware that we are able to rezone, I mean, some places have to redo how they think about, you know, they can't be the quaint little town. Sometimes they have to add to it. Oceanside's done that, and I hope we can continue to help moving forward. I just don't, I like the process for the appeals, and I think the appeals have merit. So I'm still haven't heard the right argument yet.
Thank you, Jack. Mayor Jones. Looks like you're muted.
I figured it out. So in our last arena cycle, we only built about 60,000 homes. I'm a proponent of housing, people having a place to live. I was a little disappointed that we did go with the higher number. Mayor Minto had brought up the 160,000 number, but the fact of the matter is, after seeing all the presentations today, I'm not sure how those jurisdictions will be able to meet their goals. And for me, I am concerned about meeting my goals myself, and the fact that I am not going to get allocated a higher number of housing units is somewhat comforting based on what we can do as a board. I have my regional hat on. I'm concerned again, setting us up, because now the state has the ability to fine us if we are not meeting our RHNA goals. And I don't believe that any of us are going to meet our RHNA goals. We're certainly going to try, of course, but since the cities don't actually build the housing and it's private development, I think that's part of the conversation that I have literally brought up many, many times, and about the lack of funds to actually build the housing. I can't support the substitution because I feel that the smaller cities for failure, and I personally I'm not willing to do something like that again. I am definitely, I think my record stands for itself that I am a proponent of housing. However, I have an issue with pushing forward with the substitute motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out, in the unincorporated areas here, in the last ballot, in the last election, Newland Sierra lost in that election. That was 2,300 homes in the unincorporated area. And then just recently at the Board of Supervisors, we shot down Lilac Hills Ranch in the unincorporated area, and that was 1,700 homes. So that was 4,000 homes that were, not going to be building in the unincorporated areas, and it's going to go into the cities and into the smaller cities. And I'm not supporting the substitute motion, but we're kind of dyslexic here. It's a double standard. We don't want any homes in the unincorporated area. That seems to be the trend. And now, we're seeing cities pushing back on housing as well. So I'm just kind of pointing out the fact that housing's got to go somewhere.
Thank you, Supervisor. Do we have any other board comments or questions? We have a substitute motion on a second to approve staff recommendation. Any further comment or questions from the board? Seeing none, we have the motion from Mayor Salas and the second from, I think, Mayor Sotelo Solis to approve staff recommendation. Tessa, would you please do the vote?
Mayor Voss?
Yes.
I apologize. Let me turn on my camera. To clarify, ultimately the staff recommendation, simply adopting the staff recommendation, it needs to be clarified that this is also adopting the findings that were included within the staff report supporting the staff recommendation. That's a necessary element of your decision on this.
Okay, Mayor Salas, would you please confirm that that's consistent with your desire?
Yes, that's part of the motion.
Thank you. And Mayor Sotelo Solis?
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Tessa, would you please take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. On item 13, City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
No.
No.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, aye.
City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, no.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Desmond, no.
City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
City of El Cajon is absent. City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, no.
City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Dedina, no.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Baber.
Baber, no.
City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, no.
City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Jack Feller.
No.
City of Poway, Chair Voss.
No.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Yes.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, no.
City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, no.
City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, no.
City of Vista, Mayor Ritter. Mayor Ritter. Could you indicate your vote in the chat? We do not hear you. Your mic is open. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor Ritter has texted me her vote, and for the record, it is no. That item fails. That motion fails.
Chair Voss, I'd like to call for a weighted vote.
Who's that?
I believe that was Mayor Salas calling for a weighted vote.
This is Vivian. I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. We have a motion and a second for a weighted vote.
I will do the roll call vote. City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
Schumacher, no.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, aye.
City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, no.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Desmond, no.
City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
City of El Cajon is absent. City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, no.
City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Dedina, no.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Baber.
Baber, no.
City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Vasquez, no.
City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Heck no.
City of Poway, Chair Voss.
No.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Yes.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
No, Jones.
City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, no.
City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, no.
Excuse me.
My apologies. City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
And Chair, this is Councilmember Gomez. I didn't get a chance to register my vote.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
was going to circle back. We need County B and City B.
Yes, Chair, I have them. I will be calling them next after
Thank you.
Mayor Ritter. I believe she will text me. I'll go ahead with, Ritter did text me. Her vote is no on this motion. County of San Diego, Supervisor Gaspar.
Gaspar, no.
And City of San Diego, Council President Gomez.
Yes.
Thank you. That item passes with a weighted vote.
Thank you, Tessa, and thank you all for hanging in for this long meeting. Tessa, do we have any continued public comment?
No, sir, but I would like to state for the record that during the vote on the consent agenda, City of Lemon Grove Mayor Vasquez was having technical issues, and she would like me to state for the record that her vote on the consent agenda is yes.
Thank you, Tessa. And with that, I'll just mention our next meeting is July 10th at 10 a.m. And we are adjourned.
Mayor?
Yes.
I apologize. As part of this, there's a second element to your RENA item that includes adoption of the RENA plan. I'm going to ask Seth to summarize what this follow-on action. It was contingent upon you reaching a final action on the RENA appeals today.
Go ahead, Seth. Hopefully we haven't lost board members, seeing as how I said that adjourn word.
Thank you, John. The second action that state law allows the board to take today is to release a draft RENA plan that reflects the status of the appeals. Attachment 10 in the staff report is the draft RENA plan that reflects staff's recommendations on each of the appeals. So the board has the opportunity to vote to release the RENA plan. We will bring the final RENA plan back to the board at a later meeting.
Thank you, Seth. Mr. Kirk, anything else?
No, sir.
Thank you. With that, we'll stand adjourned.
Mayor, for this, you need to take action in order to take this action. You can do that today. If you want, you can do that at your next meeting, but ideally you would move forward today.
Okay, so we would need a motion on a second.
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to move forward on the motion stated by staff.
Thank you, Mayor Sotelo. So who was the second?
Dallas?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Tessa, would you please take the vote? And apologies, it wasn't in my notes, so that's why I didn't have it, John.
It's our fault, sir.
Thank you, Chair. On this motion, City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Dallas, aye.
City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Nope.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Desmond, no.
City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
City of El Cajon is absent. City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, no.
City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Dedina, no.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Baber.
Baber, no.
City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Vasquez, no.
City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Feller, no.
City of Poway, Chair Voss.
No.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, no.
City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, no.
City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, no.
City of Vista, Mayor Ritter. Mayor Ritter has indicated by text to me that her vote is no. That motion fails.
Chair, this is Councilmember Moreno. I'd like to call for a weighted vote.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. And
I
do we
will
have a
second it, Dallas.
Thank you, Mayor Salas. Tessa?
Thank you, Chair. On the weighted vote for this item, Councilmember, City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Dallas, aye.
City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, no.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Desmond, no.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Gaspar.
Tessa, we're changing the voting. Can you just hold on 1 second, please?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Don't worry. Thank you. Okay, we're good now. Go ahead. Oh, we have to start over.
Can I indicate this, John, for the record, since the members have already voted? City of Carlsbad was yes. City of Chula Vista was yes. City of Coronado was no. County Supervisor A, Desmond, was no. Supervisor Gaspar.
Yes, that's fine, Tessa, so long as they were announced on the record.
And I'm going to ask County Supervisor Gaspar to state for the record her vote. Is she still on? I believe she is absent. City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Yes.
City of El Cajon is absent. City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, no.
City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Dedina, no.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Baber.
No.
City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Vasquez, no.
City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, yes.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
No, ma'am.
City of Poway, Chair Voss.
No.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
City of San Diego, Council President Gomez.
Yes.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, no.
Thank you. City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, no.
City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, no.
City of Vista, Mayor Ritter has indicated in a text to me that her vote is no.
And Tessa, I just got a note from Supervisor Gaspar. She's having technical difficulties. She said she is voting no.
I will indicate no for Supervisor Gaspar on the record. That motion passes with the weighted vote.
Thank you all, and apologies again for me not handling that very clearly at the end. Our next meeting is July 10th, 10 a.m. And now we are adjourned.